Great. So today is March 4th, 2022. My name is Rick Charney, and this interview will be with Stan Friedman on behalf of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. And Stan, please tell us a little bit about your family tree and maybe if you can remember your grandparents and your parents and whatever you can tell us.
Okay, my grandparents were Wolf and Jenny Malowitz. They came to Dallas right at the turn of the century, about 1900, maybe a little before that. They had 6 children, of which my mother was the 5th. She was born here in Dallas, and her name was Henrietta Malowitz. And they lived on South Boulevard in South Dallas, right across the street from what used to be Temple Emmanuel.
Do you know why they moved to Dallas in that time period?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I know they came from, I think they came from either the Ukraine or from the Poland or the Pale. It was a part of the Europe that kept changing ownership from time to time. So they never really could tell me where exactly they were from, but it was from a little shuttle somewhere in Eastern Europe. But that's my connection to Dallas. My father was from Hungary, and he didn't live in Dallas. He lived in San Antonio, which is where we moved. I was born in Dallas, but lived in San Antonio most of my teenage years, or my child years. And I moved back to Dallas in probably about 1963.
What did your parents do for work?
All right. My father started out, and from what I can remember, in San Antonio. He made military supplies, Air Force epaulettes, and he also made women's skirts. I don't know if you were even born then, but the poodle skirts, he made a lot of those. Then when I was 13, we moved from San Antonio to Victoria on the coast, on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
And he worked in a men's store there.
Okay. And did mom work or?
She didn't work until after my father died. At that time, she got a job with the Social Security Administration in Victoria.
Okay,
as a clerical.
So your family was in Victoria for a while then?
Yes. Actually, I left Victoria when I was 16. When I was 16, I went to the University of Texas in Austin, and really never came back to Victoria. After I graduated at the University of Texas, I came to Houston for 3 months, and then to Dallas.
And why Dallas?
That's where I worked for the Department of Health and Human Services, and that's where they sent me after my training period.
Okay. And you said you went to college at 16 when most people go at 18. Were you
Right.
ahead of the game, or what's the story there?
I'll tell you the story. I started my birthday is in January. So I started when I was 5.5 instead of 6. And then I skipped the 2nd grade. And it wasn't because I was so smart. It was because I was the tallest in the room. So they also, my first name is really Allen, and they already had 3 Allens in the room. So they moved me up to the second grade when I was 5.5.
Okay. So you were a grade and a half, plus you were born in January.
Right.
And how did the name change happen? You got to share that story.
I really don't know. I was always called Stan. They always call me by my middle name. And I really don't have an answer. I've heard stories about it, but I don't know.
So your driver's license probably says Alan Stan
It does. It says
Friedman.
Alan Stanley Friedman.
Okay. And what about siblings?
I had two brothers, David and Michael. They were both younger than me. I was the oldest. Both have since passed on.
Sorry to hear that. And were they in the Dallas community, or I guess you all kind of grew up in Victoria? You went to Austin, then you went to Houston, and then ended up in Dallas. Did they follow a similar track?
David did. He lived in Dallas his whole life after he left the University of Texas. At the University of Texas, all three of us were members of Tau Delta Phi fraternity, and I was the oldest. And somehow, some way, I got the nickname Frito when I was at Texas, and I was called that. And so my next brother, David, when he went up there, they called him Chippo, and the youngest one, Michael, they called him Tato.
Love it.
So and Chippo stuck. The name Chippo stuck until he died. And so Chippo and I both lived in Dallas all our life. In fact, we married sisters.
And you got to tell us the story. This is what we want to hear.
All right.
How did you guys meet?
All right.
How'd the brothers meet the sisters? Was it in Austin?
No. I'm not sure how Chippo met Nikki, but he met her and he was dating her. And he was living with me at the time. And he was still in school. He was going to Arlington State College at that, it was called Arlington State College at that time. And Nikki's mother, Sylvia, decided that I should meet her oldest daughter, Marcia. And so we met and it worked out.
Yes, it did.
And I'll let her tell you anything about it.
Right. I want to hear Marcia's story next. So you met Marcia before Chippo met Mickey.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
So got it.
Nikki and Chippo introduced us to
Each other.
each other.
Got it. And just to back up a little bit more, any fun childhood stories that you remember with you and your two brothers, riding bikes, or favorite toys that the future generations will be Googling what that toy is?
All right. Well, probably the most interesting story I can think of is we used to come, we lived in San Antonio when I was a child, but we used to come to Dallas for Passover every year for my grandparents. And like I said, they lived right across the street from Temple Emmanuel. It was Temple Emmanuel at that time on South Boulevard. And the interesting thing about it, my grandparents were Orthodox. And at that time, this was back in the 40s, Orthodox Jews and Reformed Jews didn't get along very well. And we were not allowed to play on the grounds at Temple Emmanuel because those people weren't really Jewish.
Right.
So it's a little interesting story that happened here in Dallas.
Right, and very relevant. So just tell us more about any Jewish traditions. I mean, what do you remember at that age that stuck with you?
Well, being from San Antonio, and then we were, I was a member at Temple Bethel in San Antonio, and that's where I became bar mitzvah and so forth. And then we moved to Victoria, and there were only 35 Jewish families in Victoria. So we didn't have very much Judaism in Victoria. They did have a synagogue, and we went to services every Friday night. And I did teach in the Sunday school. But other than that, it was very little. It wasn't until I got to college and became a member of Tau Delt, which was a Jewish fraternity, that I really got involved in the Jewish culture.
Which is more than the average person, I would say. The combination of Friday night services and a Jewish fraternity is a lot. And I imagine in Victoria, there weren't that many Jews, so most of your friends were not Jewish. But as you kind of came out of college and settled into your young adulthood, were you mostly mixing with Jewish people, or was a small percentage of your network?
It was mostly with Jewish people. Because at that point, I had my fraternity brothers, who were, some of which lived in Dallas. Plus, I'd met Marcia, and most of the people that dealt with that family were Jewish. So that's.
So thinking about your 20s, what activities, what career path, and what organizations were you a part of?
Okay, we were members of Temple Emmanuel.
Okay.
And really, as far as being Jewish, that was about it. We were members of the JCC and Temple Emmanuel. And we celebrated the holidays, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And we got married. Like I said, we got married at Temple Emmanuel in 1966. And Marcia and I left Dallas in 1968. We moved to Baltimore for 5 years. And then we came back in 1972. And at that point, we celebrated holidays, but that was about it. Our three sons, all three of our sons were bar mitzvahed at Temple Emmanuel.
And career-wise, did you move to Baltimore for work, or?
Yes. I was working for the Social Security Administration at that time. And this was in 1966, when they had just gotten a lot of their new computer equipment. And they were looking for people to become programmers. So I went up there and learned to be a computer programmer.
Right.
And was there for 5 years. And then I moved back here in 1972, still working for the Social Security Administration, but in their regional office.
Got it. And now the kids are toddlers and young children. Any funny stories or memories or anything you can recall from those days?
Not a lot, other than they were not very interested in being Jews. They were more interested in football and baseball and so forth. It wasn't until my youngest son, Jeff, joined BBYO that we really got involved with the Jewish community, other than the JCC.
And did you live near the JCC?
No, we lived in Richardson at the time, but we spent a whole lot of time at the JCC because of their children's sports.
Got it. And the kids all went through RISD?
Yes.
Okay. And the names of your 3 kids, boys?
I have twins, Joel and Mark, and then Jeff is the youngest one.
What made you decide to have a 3rd child?
Stupidity.
It was an accident. It was not planned.
I have 2 4-year-old twin boys myself.
Oh.
And my wife and I are debating a 3rd round. So I appreciate your feedback.
Mm.
And where are the boys today?
Well, two of them, Joel and Mark, live in the Dallas area. One lives in Allen, one lives in Frisco. And my youngest one, Jeff, lives in Nashville.
Okay. And I guess where did they go to school?
They went to school at in Richardson, the Richardson School District, Buckner High School.
Sure. Okay. If you, in your line of field, you were pretty involved with different civic organizations and just the community, growth and development. Any specific stories of you helping someone or some group during a time of need that you'd like to share, or anything memorable from your, I guess, 30s and 40s that you want to share? Highlights?
John?
Well, I can tell you that after Jeff, my youngest child, became after he got out of BBYO, and he sort of got us involved, Marcia and myself, involved in BBYO, and we became advisors to BBYO chapters. And we spent 4 years as advisors. And then about that time, I had retired from my government job and became the city director at BBYO.
Wow.
And I was there about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. During that time, we were looking for a place, a religious organization in Plano. And it was about that time that Adat Haverim was becoming established. They only had like 10 families at that point. And Marcia and I were the 11th family. So we helped that congregation grow. I became president of that congregation, and I was there for 3.5 years as president. And then we left there and we tried to open another congregation in Frisco, but financially that one didn't work out too well. So then we came back to Plano and we became members at Nishmat Am, which is a conservative congregation, which Rabbi Yitz Cohen has. And I became president there for 2 years. So I can say that I've been president of both a reform and a conservative congregation.
And what were some of the biggest differences?
Basically, just the biggest differences were in the services, especially the Shabbat day, the weekly service, which was completely different than the Reform congregation was.
Sure. And you could have committed your time to so many different types of organizations. Why did you choose to stay involved with the Jewish organizations?
I guess at that time, I felt like all of a sudden my Judaism became very important to me. And that's why I stayed with them. In fact, after I left BBYO as city director, I went to work for the Federation, Jewish Federation, for a couple of years, and worked there. And I only left there because my youngest son, who was living in Houston at the time, came up and he owned a company down there called Houston Jewish Funerals. And he was wanting to open one here in Dallas. And he came up and asked me if I would manage it for him. And so that's when I left the Federation and became the manager at Dallas Jewish Funerals. And later, during that time, I decided I might as well become a funeral director. And I actually went to funeral director school. I did it by correspondence and became a funeral director, and was there for 5 years as a funeral director.
And you said something that was very interesting. Judaism became very important in your life. Call it late adult, maybe as the kids were
Yes.
leaving the house. I think
Well,
that's something you need to expand on
it
for the
had-
audience.
I'll be very honest, it had more to do with my health than anything else. When I was 49 or 50, I almost had a heart attack and went to the hospital, and they ended up giving me a quadruple bypass.
Hmm.
And while I was there, my lungs got infected, and I was on a respirator for over a month.
Hmm.
And when I got out, there was just something that drew me into wanting to know more about my religion and more about religion. And that's what it was all about, I think.
Yeah, that must have been a pretty spiritual moment to believe and have the willpower to withstand that type of health
Yeah.
issue to
Yeah.
want to live and be strong.
Up until that time, I was basically just a twice a year Jew,
Hmm.
for Passover and the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur holidays. That was it.
And it's interesting because it's kind of after your kids were becoming adults, or
Oh,
as
yes.
your kids were becoming adults. So what type of impact did your renewed commitment to Judaism have on the three boys?
Actually, none.
Yeah, they were
I'll be honest
independent
with
by
you.
then.
I'll be honest with you. It didn't affect them at all.
And that didn't change your mind. That was something you still had a passion for
No,
at that time.
right.
Okay. How has the Jewish community changed over the decades, if at all, from your perspective?
It's just grown. I don't think it really has changed that much. When as over the decades, I was with both Jews my age plus Jews, much younger Jews, because we were advisors at BBYO.
Mhm,
And I don't think anything's changed that much.
mhm. And did you travel much? I mean, Israel trips and
No,
none of that.
no, none of that. I really did. We've never been to Israel. We were planning on going twice, and both times they canceled the trips on us because of the Fatah.
Okay. Okay. Anything else on the Jewish community in general, and maybe peers or friends that were instrumental in terms of leading the community that made an impact on you? Anything like that?
No, I don't. I can't think of anything.
And then if you do, you can answer it again in the next question. But in general, do you have, even outside of the Jewish community, certain role models or people that you're most proud of?
No?
No, I was. I can't think of anything.
Okay. What are you doing this weekend, Stan?
What am I doing this weekend?
Yeah. Shabbat tonight?
Well, we do a Torah study for people at Frisco Lakes in Frisco every Saturday, and we'll be doing that tomorrow.
Okay.
And we've done that. Interesting thing about that is even during the pandemic, we continued that weekly, on Zoom. And now we're meeting again in person.
Wow,
But this has gone on for several years now.
that's impressive. And the population growth in Frisco and just in Texas in general is
Oh, it's gone crazy.
bonkers. Yeah. Okay. Well, as we conclude the interview, we obviously appreciate your contributions to the community, your involvement. I'm sure a lot of individuals, both young and old, appreciate you as an individual. And is there anything you want to kind of go on record to say to the community back that will be archived indefinitely?
Well, I just want to thank the community for putting up with me all these years. And that's about it.
And what about advice for the future generations?
Oh, yeah, now you've caught me. I hadn't really thought about that.
I assume the three boys have kids. Do you mind just sharing the quantity of grandkids that you have?
Yeah, I have 4 grandchildren,
Okay.
and 3 of which are not being raised Jewish. The 4th one is, or
Okay.
was. They're all adults now.
Got it. The grandkids.
Yes.
Got it. And any advice in general for future generations, including those grandkids?
You just keep the peace.
Keep the peace. I love
Yeah.
it. Well, thank you so much for doing this. And yeah, I guess that's 2:30 on the dot. So
Okay.
that'll conclude the interview.